Let's talk about the many roles of dopamine. Dopamine, we already know, is a neurotransmitter. And in an earlier lecture, and one of the first lectures in this institute, we learned that dopamine is diminished in production because of what's going on in the brain of the person who lives with Parkinson's disease. Okay, well, there's some science about dopamine that I'd like to talk with you about. And I want to basically break it down into two sections. Okay, section number one is we're going to look at the science and the many roles of dopamine, just generally speaking, and how as humans we need it. If we didn't have it, we'd be dead. What it does for us, what it can do for us, and some other factors. Okay, so just in general, being human, what is it that dopamine does for us? Okay, and then in the second part, I want to talk about dopamine in the Parkinson's population. All right, so dopamine has been talked about as the pleasure molecule, right? The molecule that gives pleasure. Could be a little bit of truth to that, but it's not really the way it is. All right, it's not really like that. Dopamine is more of a driver. All right, it is a driver. As a matter of fact, my favorite book about dopamine is entitled The Molecule of More. If you don't have it, I highly recommend you buy it, borrow it, get it, read it, devour it. It will explain so much about what dopamine does. It will explain so much about how it can affect us positively and negatively. All right. In this book, Dr. Daniel Z. Lieberman, the author and psychiatrist, Dr. Lieberman, talks about dopamine as it needs something to do. Dopamine is the molecule of more. It needs something to do. All right. It's going to be the primary molecule or chemical, neurochemical in the brain that drives us towards goals, things like a degree, a promotion, maybe training for, and then finishing the marathon, okay? Finding a partner or a mate, or as simple as getting the cup of coffee in the other room, okay? It's gonna drive us to do that. Now, as a matter of fact, if we look and take a look at long ago, I'm talking thousands of years ago, okay? When we were a hunter and gatherer population, dopamine is what drove us to get out there and hunt our prey or harvest our prey, bring it back so that we could eat and survive. Dopamine was all about survival. And of course, probably attracting a partner too, and reproduction. Okay, but it does other things too. Let's take an example that might seem a little bit odd. Have you ever been in a situation though where you're anticipating something and you're surprised? Maybe you're surprised by something. Maybe you're going to work and there's a new bakery on the way, and you say, "Oh boy, this is great! I can get some donuts. I can get my bagel. I can get my coffee, or whatever it is that you like to get." Okay, you didn't expect this bakery, but it's on your way. By the way, this comes direct from Daniel Z. Lieberman lecture. So I want to give credit where credit's due. This comes direct from Lieberman. But it's a great example because I know that down the road here for me, when a new place opened up, it's like, oh man, I got, Starbucks is closer now. They have coffee now. It's closer. I can get my nitro cold brew, which is my favorite cold brew of any. It's a Starbucks cold brew. And oh, wow, it's great. So the first time is the best time. It's just like a lot of times the first time is the best time for anything because we anticipate a certain, your brain is constantly calculating resources that are available and it has expectations of whatever it's used to, okay? But there's this thing called reward prediction error, okay? So for example, when you receive something you don't expect that you like, you're going to get a dopamine hit. So that bakery that offers that thing you want, that donut, that coffee, that bagel, whatever it is, that gives you dopamine. Okay, well, it gives you the most dopamine probably the first time. Okay, or let's say your paycheck increases and you get a raise. Oh man, this is good. I got a promotion or whatever. I got a raise. you get your paycheck and it's bumped up. Oh, this is great. It's always best the first time, right? Then you learn to your baseline changes, and now you expect it. You know that the bakery's down the road, so it's not a big deal anymore. You know you're going to get that increased amount of money, so you're glad to get it, but it's not a dopamine hit anymore. So tonic dopamine levels go back to baseline because it's now adjusted. Okay, so now you want more, possibly, right? More money, a bakery even closer to your work, possibly, or a bakery you like better, things like that. Okay, so just looking here to review real quick. Brain is constantly calculating resources that are available. When you receive more, you get more dopamine. All right, so I think I probably made that pretty clear, right? All right, let's go into the next page of notes here. Dopamine responds primarily to novelty or newness. You know, there's a saying, it's better to shop than to buy. Now, some of you may disagree with me because the buying is the part that you love. But is it really? Is it really the part you love? Or is the seeking out the thing that you think you want, maybe that's just a little bit better? I can speak from experience that when I got my iPhone 10, I was so excited. And it's 3 years ago, over 3 years. I've had this phone 3 years. I want the 13. I want that 13 more than you can imagine. Why? Well, basically because of the camera and the various cameras and the wide angle lens and the pictures I see it takes from people who have that phone, who I've seen those pictures. I want those pictures. I'm not going to get it because I know that I don't need it, you know, but I like to think about it, and I'm sure the 14 will come out and I'll want that. And who knows, at some point this one will die and I'll have to get a phone. So maybe I'll get a 12 or 13 used and whatever. I don't know. The bottom line is, though, if I get this, if I get the phone, I'm going to be happy. I don't know, for a week, a few days, 2 weeks. Eventually, it's just going to go back to tonic baseline. There's no more dopamine because the minute you acquire what it is that you were seeking, dopamine shuts off. It's done its job. Then it's time to go into and find, and this is where you need to probably concentrate on this. I need to concentrate on it, is the here and now chemicals. Okay. This would be the satisfaction of having the new phone or the new car or whatever it is that you're seeking. All right. I love the saying, it's better to shop than to buy. Once you receive the item, dopamine it's done its job and it shuts off. There are a couple more sayings I like too before we get into talking about the balance of here and now neurochemicals combined with dopamine. Right. It's better to travel hopefully than it is to arrive. Well, I've traveled all over the world and I've arrived at some pretty cool places. I would tell you that the one place that blew me away is when I came up out of the subway off the train in Rome and I saw the Colosseum. That was not a disappointment. Okay. But I've gone to a lot of places where it was really great at first, or maybe it wasn't really great. It was just okay, or it was good. But I go back, and by the 10th time I'm there, or the second or the third time I'm there, it doesn't matter anymore. Yet I have found here and now chemicals. I've been able to experience satisfaction of, oh, I'm here, it's now, this is beautiful. But that needs to be appreciated, so you're not constantly always seeking something else, which basically puts you into living into the future, which a lot of us do, and I'm guilty of it as charged, but I try to be in the here and now more. So it's better to travel hopefully than to arrive. That's one saying. It's better to anticipate than to have. Think about that one. Just think about it. I won't go into detail. Okay, so we're born with tonic baseline dopamine circuitry. Okay. For example, excess dopamine circuitry can include, oftentimes includes the population. I'm one of them who lives with ADHD, although most people who have it as youngsters tend to grow out of it to some degree or maybe completely. It also tends to lead to addictions. Okay, that population with excess dopamine circuitry, more than the normal tonic baseline is going to probably, well, there's a high likelihood of addictions. Okay. Those who are born with a less than tonic level of, or less than normal tonic level baseline, however they measure it. I have actually no idea how they measure it. But if they don't have sufficient dopamine, this can lead to depression, lack of motivation, maybe seeking dopamine from outside sources, which again, it could maybe lead to down the addiction path too, because you want that pick me up. So too much, too little, not good. Well, how do we fix that? I don't know. I'm not a doctor, but I can tell you one thing. I can tell you that the here and now chemicals, okay, when we have the experience of a happy now and we focus on that and learn to appreciate where we're at right now, well, this can be really good. I mean, this is going to change your life. This is going to probably make you feel good if you can get into that mode of appreciating where you're at right now or who you're with. Okay, satisfaction chemicals. Let's talk about those. 4 primary chemicals are involved in satisfaction. You've probably heard of all of them or most of them. Serotonin, oxytocin, endorphins of various kinds, and plus another one, which is kind of a cool name. I like this name called endocannabinoids. All right, all these. When you get that phone, okay, when you get that car, when you get that thing, maybe it's the degree. If you ever gotten a degree or an award, you're like, well, that's it. I know years ago, my son and I rode our bicycles 1,700 miles from Syracuse, New York to Dallas, Texas. We trained and trained and trained. I trained for 8 months. We did it. It took 14 days. We should have taken longer. It was crazy, but we did it. And when we got there, it was a rush for about 1 hour. And then, you know, I went into 3 weeks of depression. How are you going to top that? It's like some of the men who walked on the moon. I say men only because I don't think any women have walked on it yet, and they should. Anyways, men walk on the moon, they get depression, some of them, right? How are you going to beat that? So dopamine gave you that rush. It got you to where you want to go. You enjoy the arrival for a little bit. Dopamine is still circulating, then boom, it tanks. And can you get into the here and now happy chemicals? Well, I can tell you, just not to talk about me, but it is kind of important to realize that, for example, 2 weeks ago, I did a Spartan Ultra, right? No, not Ultra. I think it was a Beast Spartan Super race, 7.3 miles. I think it was 25 or 26. Well, I have the shirt on right here. On the back, it says 20 something obstacles. And I finished it. And you know what? When I finished it, I was able, with my knowledge of dopamine, I was able to really, I'm still appreciating it now that I finished this race. Now, I'll admit, I'm looking forward to the next one, which I think is in October. But I'm happy that I finished it because I'm mindful of the fact that I could live into the future, but I'm very much appreciating. So remember that balance is going to be, best balance is going to occur when you balance the dopamine with the here and now chemicals, again, endocannabinoids, oxytocin, endorphins, and serotonin. All right. So there's a lot more we could talk about dopamine. There's a whole lot more, but let's break it into part 2. Okay. Let's talk about dopamine and Parkinson's disease. Remember, people with Parkinson's are people too. Right now, why do I say that? I say it because Parkinson's doesn't define you. You are a person who lives with Parkinson's, if that's what you live with. Nor does a cancer or a tumor or whatever. Those don't define who you are. You are a person who lives with whatever. All right. We know that dopamine, once again, we know that it is a neurotransmitter, but it is diminished in production because of what's happening in the substantia nigra, which is the primary production center of dopamine in the brain, and brain cells are dying off in the substantia nigra, primarily that region and some other regions as well, so that not as much dopamine is produced. Well, this can lead to, think about this, number one non-motor symptom statistically in Parkinson's is depression. What did we talk about just a couple of minutes ago? People with less than normal tonic levels of dopamine in the brain oftentimes experience depression. Okay. This can lead also to lack of motivation. Why is it that so many people with Parkinson's like or Parkinson's itself movement disorders experience a lack of motivation? Maybe it's so hard sometimes to get people off the couch, out of the chair, and up and moving, and maybe coming into my clinic or getting up for me when I go to their house and exercising. I don't feel like it. Well, there's a lack of dopamine. Okay, well, the good news is this: for all of us, people with Parkinson's and all other people, unless there's something going on that could interfere with this, which I'm not a doctor, so I don't know exactly what it would be. But generally speaking, if you just get up and get started and get moving, doing something that you will do because you like to do it, that movement is going to actually start to produce more dopamine. So you're going to get more energy to keep going. It's like I say, just get started and you get the energy to keep going. I think I was probably born with lower than usual baseline. I don't know. I have ADHD, so maybe it was higher. I really don't know. All I know is I really never feel like exercising, but I do it almost every day because once I get started, I always feel better. I want to feel better. I felt sad 2 days ago. I got on my mountain bike. I did 2 hours. I planned on about 45 minutes. I felt so good. I kept going 2 hours, rough terrain, really tough workout. Loved it. Felt great all day and the next day. All right. So just get started. Do something you like to do too. By the way, dopamine is going to be created when you do stuff you like to do. Not to mention, if you go to the BDNF lecture in this, you're going to find out how exercise is going to slow death of dying brain cells, because brain-derived neurotrophic factor is like miracle growth for the brain. And as it is produced via elevated heart rate, it's also cardio and elevated heart rate is the number one known way via exercise to slow disease progression in Alzheimer's, dementia, Parkinson's, and other diagnosis of the brain. Exercise, move, could be just get out and walk. Whatever you'll do is what you need to do. Get out and start to do it. Get the BDNF, get the dopamine going, feel better physically, mentally, have more energy. Okay, so that's one way to get dopamine. We also know that people with Parkinson's disease oftentimes take a dopamine replacement, something like Cinemet, levodopa, carbidopa, whatever it is. They're all dopamine replacements. These are designed to supplement the lack of dopamine that is happening, because that's what they have, lack of dopamine. All right. So we will know that a lot of times, although we have some steady state people, I'll describe what that means in just a moment. When people take their levodopa, their dopamine replacement, it might take half hour, whatever. Everyone's different. It might even vary from day to day or hour to hour, but it's going to take a little bit for it to kick in, to have a noticeable improvement in function, motor function, and movement. All right. So as they realize those improvements, we call this the on period. I have a study starting up here. Really, so we're going to be doing 2 studies in my clinic here, research, pilot data studies. And we're really excited, but we know that when we do these studies, we have to have our people with Parkinson's come in when they're in an on state. So most of them, they're going to take their levodopa replacement about 1 hour or so, whatever's best for them as individuals, before they get here, before they start their 1 hour of what we have to do in this study. Now, they turn on because the dopamine has been taken into the system, and now it's in their brain and it's causing them to likely function better to some degree. All right. We know that it only lasts for a certain amount of time. Well, it could be an hour for some people. I have one gentleman in 1 hour. He's done. That's it. He's in off state and he can't do anything at all other than maybe move his arms, but he can't stand. He can't walk. When he's on, he can walk. Okay. Well, on period versus off period. Once it wears off, we're going into an off period or diminished function state, right? Diminished ability to move. Some people, though, are very, very steady state. Well, that's actually really nice, because the dopamine probably helps to regulate them. I have a lady who just on her own, I didn't tell her to do it, she stopped taking her dopamine replacement. By the way, disclaimer, don't stop taking your dopamine replacement without talking to your neurologist. And if you do, that's on your own. I didn't recommend it, but there's a lady I know who did, and it has not affected her at all. So that's neither here nor there. I've said what I needed to say on that, but she's steady state, whether she's on dopamine or not on dopamine replacement. Either way, she functions the same every time, but everyone's different. Okay. I say one more time, talk with your neurologist before you make any dosage change if you're on a dopamine replacement medication. Now, some side effects from dopamine replacement medications can be, I'll talk about the rare one first. Right now, I've heard of it before and met people before with this side effect. Very rare. Right now, I'm only working with one who, when he takes levodopa carbidopa, he gets sleepy. He can barely stay awake. So he actually doesn't take it before he works out with me. And he does much better when he doesn't take it. That's very unusual, but it is the case with this gentleman. Almost all the time, it will improve movement, mobility, and stability, and function and control. Now, if you ever notice a person with Parkinson's or Parkinsonism, or a person who's on a dopamine replacement medication, doing something like all of a sudden shopping a lot or gambling, or they're hypersexual, well, those are the three most common side effects of levodopa or dopamine replacement overdosage, meaning the dosage is too high, they don't need that much, and it puts them into this state of doing one of those three things. There are other things too, but those are the three most statistically common side effects of too high. I have a friend of mine in England. I wrote about her in my first book called Parkinson's Regeneration Training. It's available on Amazon if you want to get it. It's also available in an audio format on Audible. Okay, so her quick story about her. She didn't know she was taking too much dopamine. It's what she was prescribed, but it was too much for her. She went on eBay to buy one purse. She ended up bidding on 97 purses. She ended up winning 79 bids, had to pay for 79 purses. Husband says, "Where's all the money?" She says, "I couldn't control myself. I bought 79 purses. I only wanted one." Well, that's a case of a side effect of too much dopamine. Went to her neurologist, had the prescription dosage lowered, and problem solved. It went away. She didn't have that problem again. Okay, so I'm just telling you this because I want you to know that we're messing with a very powerful neurotransmitter hormone, neurochemical. Too little is bad, too much is bad. The right amount is what people need. So you would want to see your neurologist. Okay, so basically, let's go back now and just kind of recap everything. We know dopamine is a neurotransmitter. It tells our body, our brain tells our body through our peripheral and central nervous systems what to do. Okay, that's in another lecture. But also, we know that it's a driver. We know that it will drive us towards a goal, a partner, a mate, the cup of coffee, a degree, a reward, an accomplishment. Okay, that's what it was designed. It's like a survival, basically, and reproduction. We know that it can drive us towards joy. We seek out the new phone, the new car, the new thing, the new gadget. When we get the gadget, we might be happy for a little bit, and then all of a sudden we're not. That's when you'll want to try to enjoy whatever. Maybe you're going someplace and you get there and you have arrived. Like I said, it's better to travel hopefully than to arrive. Well, then you arrive and maybe it's just okay. It's not that good. Well, hopefully you can get in the other here and now chemicals, experience a happy now and the feeling of satisfaction because your endorphins, oxytocin, endocannabinoids, and serotonin have kicked in, and you can feel the satisfaction of where you are because dopamine drove you there, right? And of course, that's for all humans. We also know that besides being a driver, okay, driving us towards things, we know if we don't have enough of it, which Parkinson's, we know that for certain people with Parkinson's, it can be very difficult to get them started to do anything, very difficult to get them off the chair, off the couch, and get into exercise. So just start moving and you get the energy to keep going, because dopamine will be produced as you exercise, and it happens pretty quick. And of course, the last thing, but not least, I already said it, but we're just recapping here again, is statistically the number one non-motor symptom in Parkinson's is depression. And this would, one factor in this is very likely the lack of dopamine, the deficiency. That's it for this lecture. And again, thanks for watching. On to the next one.